Today's daf is 50, and we're at the bottom of 49b. And I'm going to back up just a couple of lines from where we got to yesterday, to Haraya Yesh, which is like halfway up, right in the middle of the line. So just to get us back into the sugya, the Mishnah had said that that a wife who has property, the husband cannot make a chazaka on it. Okay, so the Gemara implies from that here, haraya yesh. So that means that if he has a raya, if he has proof that he bought the field or got it or acquired it somehow, then the sale is good. So tema nachas ruach asisi labali. How is it that we can say that the husband can sell, that there's a valid sale between the husband and the wife? The wife can always claim that she was under duress when she did the sale. Not duress exactly, but like she felt pressured and she wanted to make her husband happy. So she didn't really want to sell the field, but she felt pressured to do so. And so the sale is really coerced in a way and is not valid. So why isn't that the case here? Milot's not. Where do we have a demonstration of that? Proof of that? We have a Mishnah. Lakach mina ish v'chazer v'lakach mina isha. If you bought a property from a man and then you bought it from the wife. So in other words, the wife has a lien on all the husband's properties because she has a ksuba. Right. So you pay the husband for the field, and then you pay off the lien to the wife. So michobatel, it's not a good sale. Why not? Alma must be the wife must have felt pressured because clearly the husband wants to sell the field, and so she felt pressured to make him happy to sell her lien on the field. So it's not a good transaction. Say the same thing here. So answers but we already said about that Mishnah, further to that Mishnah, that Mishnah is only talking about three particular cases of property that's being sold. And what are those three? But the point is that that Mishnah is only talking about these specific cases, so we can say that in our case, our Mishnah is referring to a general, a case which is not like that, and so we would not say nachas ruach hasisi l'mali. What are the three cases in which that Mishnah says it's not a good sale because their wife feels pressured? Here they are. Acha shekasav lavik subasa. The first one is land which where the ksuba specifies which field is subordinate, is under lien by the ksuba. So even though the ksuba is, by its very nature, it puts a lien on all the properties, but if one field is specified, so maybe she feels that like that's really the one that I'm worried about, and so if he's trying to sell that field, then we would definitely, that's the case in which we would say, yeah, if she sold that field that's specifically referred to in Ksuba, she wouldn't have done that unless she felt pressured. Okay, so that's one. That's case number one.
What's the case where it would be attached as a lien in the ketubah?
Well, okay, so Ksuba says like all the property I have is Meshuba to the Ksuba, right? But if he added into the Ksuba, and in particular, it will be paid from this particular field. So it seems like, sure, the rules don't really change. Like all the other properties are still under lien from the Ktuba. However, we're saying the Mishnah is, or the Gemara is, or Rabbi Bar Chana is saying that the particular field that is referred to in the Ksuba, that is, she would be particularly reluctant to sell that one off. Okay, and if she does sell it off, we would say that she feels pressured. All right, so in other words, there is no halachic difference. There is no difference in the end, really, between one field and the other. She gets her ksuba from whichever fields from whatever property is available. But if the ktuba specified one particular field, even though it doesn't really have any practical meaning, but we feel like the woman is particularly not going to want to sell that field.
So if it's written in the ketubah, that's the money that she would get if she were divorced. He would have to sell that field to pay her ketubah. Is that the point?
So again, he might do that, and in all likelihood he would. However, if other property can be used to pay the ketubah as well. So like I said, there's no practical difference in putting this clause in the ketubah, right? Sure, he might pay from that property, or he might pay from another property, right? But because it's written into the ketubah, we feel like the woman is definitely not going to want to part with that property, even though the rules are essentially the same for all the properties.
If they're all the same, so if she brings the land into the marriage,
No,
then
no, we're not talking about that. We're talking
okay.
about his property that is subordinate to the ketubah.
Oh, it's his property,
Yeah,
so he has to pay the ketubah from something, but doesn't have to pay it from that property. He could pay it from something
correct.
else. He has plenty of other, let's say, other.
He might have other properties, yes. But because this is written into the ketubah, even though it doesn't have any practical effect, he doesn't have to pay it from this property. The other properties are also subordinate. Um, but because it's written into the ketubah, we feel like she's not going to want to part so easily with that property because it's no, it's more of a feeling. My understanding of it is it's more like she feels more secure knowing that there's a particular property referred to in the document, and she's not going to want to give that one up. I don't know. It's a little weak.
But isn't she getting that as part of the ketubah? Isn't she getting that property anyway? Because
Well, she could get it in cash, right? I mean,
she doesn't want to sell it because
remember
she doesn't want him to sell it because
we're
he.
not talking about where there has been a divorce or a death here. We're talking about they're still married. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And the
All
question
right.
is, this property is under lien to the ketubah,
Uh-huh.
right? So can it be sold? So will the woman agree to sell it or to sell that lien? So generally, what we're saying now is yes, she would, but not if that particular
Oh,
property is written into the document of the ketubah. Then she would not be willing to sell the lien.
uh-huh, because it's not a divorce situation.
Right. It's any marriage is a potential divorce situation. That's what this is.
So in the end, if he were to sell that property, then if there was a divorce 10 years later, that property is not available and she would want that in the future, let's say. And then,
Yeah, she would be able to, if there were no cash available to pay her ketubah, then she
right,
could repossess that land.
right, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's one case where we would say that yeah, the woman would not agree or would typically not agree, and the only reason she agreed is she felt pressured by her husband. V'achas, in other cases, sheyichad lak biksubasa. Um, the same idea, but it's not written into the ketubah. It's when he signed the ketubah and there were witnesses there, he said, I'm designating this particular plot to be where the ketubah will be paid from if it needs to be paid. So the same idea. So she wouldn't sell that so easily. So if she did, she must feel pressured. V'achas sheichnisa lo shum mishala. And the other is what you were referring to a minute ago, land that she brought into the marriage, right? It was her land, and she she brought it into the marriage and granted it to him. Um, so that she wouldn't agree to sell so quickly because she would want to take it back if she gets to take it back if they get divorced. Okay, so that she wouldn't sell so easily. If she did agree to sell it, then we assume that she was being pressured and we cancel the sale. Okay, so All right, so now, so what we've done is we've answered, Rabbi Bar Huna has answered the question that this, our Mishnah implies that that the husband can sell the wife's property, or not the wife's property, but the property from the marriage. And the other Mishnah only refers to three specific cases where he can't. So, Lemu'utemai. Now, when Rabbi Bar Huna says there's only three cases where he can sell the property, what are the other types of property that he is excluding from that? I mean, any other property owned by the husband. Kol shekain de havile eva. Um, uh, like if it's property that's not specifically mentioned in the ktuba, but it is, as I said, nonetheless subordinate to the ktuba. It is liened property, right? So if she doesn't agree to sell it, then he's really going to be annoyed. It's like, I understand, says the husband, that you don't want to sell the property that I designated for the ktuba, but why are you interfering with this other property that I have? Like, why are you not going to allow me to sell it? So she would feel even more pressured. Eva. He's going to be angry at her. Because he would say to her, Nosat begerushin v'misa. And like, clearly you're thinking about me dying or divorcing you all the time, right? Like the only reason you wouldn't agree to the sale is because you're afraid we're going to get divorced or that I'm going to die. I don't like that doesn't make me feel good. So she might feel even more pressured to sell other types of land or the lien on other types of land. Elam, now, what we're talking about where that he is allowed to sell is nichse miluk, right? That's a property that she brings in as a dowry. Um, and it's saying that that kind of sale, the sale of nichse miluk, is valid. Okay. Um, but Hamar Maimar, but the Gemara says, wait a minute, didn't the Maimar say, Ish visha shemachor b'nichse milug? If you have a husband and wife and they agree to sell someone else nichse milug, lo asuv lo klum, it's void, right? It's not permitted. So according to Ameimar's statement, that's not the kind of land that you can sell, right?
Well, it would seem
Um,
probably not because that's her
yeah,
property.
yeah,
He can
exactly.
use the payroll.
Right, right. So, it seems unlikely that she would agree to sell this property unless she felt pressure, right? So the more answers, Kitmar da Memar, what's the Memar talking about? Hecha de Zavin Ihu Umis. No, we're talking about a case where he sold the Nichsemi Log. As you say, he didn't sell the property, he sold the rights to the produce of the property, and then he dies. So Asya Ihi Umapka. So what he's saying is that the wife can come and say, "I never agreed to this," right? Like I'm taking it back, right now that he's dead, because now it's my property again, and so whatever he sold you is no longer his to sell, as it were. I mean, he's dead, but like he has the rights that he had in the payros no longer exist because he's dead. It's my property. I'm taking it back.
Well, he never had the
Um,
property per se. He had just had the rights for the
right,
payroll. It was
right,
her
exactly. So
property, and
that's why
then a
she can come
divorce,
and
she
say,
gets it back. She gets it back.
exactly, exactly. So that's why whatever rights the third party bought are no longer, they no longer exist. So she gets back the field with the Peros. Um, or or as well, Zabna Iyu Mesa, or if she sold the title to the land itself, and Umesa, and then she dies. Asa Iyu Umapik. So the husband can come and and confiscate the land. Um, B'takanta the Rabbanan. Why? Because the rabbis made this a takana. Um, that if she dies before her husband, then he's the heir, right? Um, Ukid Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, which was as stated by Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, Usha Iskinu, in Usha, this is where they made this takana. Haisha Shamachar ben Nichse Melug, a wife who sells the Nichse Melug mason, she dies. Habal Mosim Yan Lukuchos. Then the husband inherits the land, and he can take it from the third party buyer. Okay, so those are the cases where we say cancel the sale. But if they're both selling if they both sell the nichse milug, um, to somebody else, to a third party, and they both agree to it. Hinami zavna day, or she sells it to the husband. Zvini zvini, that's a good sale. Okay, so now we have, according to Amemar, we have the case uh, where the wife can sell property to the husband, and it's a valid sale. Okay, so there's no nichse milug involved. Nobody dies, right? It's just there is a case of a transaction where the wife can make a valid sale to the husband. V'bay sema, or you could understand a memar as follows. A memar diamar Rabbi Elazar. A memar is ruling like Rabbi Elazar. The Tanya, what's that? The Brisa says, "Hamochars avdo upasakimo sheyimasham shenu shloshim yom." If you sell your slave, and you say to the buyer, "I'm selling you the slave, but I'm keeping him for the next 30 days. Like he's going to work for me for the next 30 days, even though he belongs to you." Rabbi Meir Omer Harishon, the original owner, Yeshno B'din Yom Yomayim. So what happens if there's a rule that if you hit your slave, and um, let's see. Okay, so if you hit your slave and he dies, so then you are liable. You're liable for his death, right? However, if you hit him and he lingers, right? He goes to the hospital, he lasts for a few days, then you're no longer liable for his death. The Torah says, "Achim yom or yomayim yamod," if he hangs on for a day or two. So it's not, as it were, a direct result of being hit by you. Lo yukam ki kasbahu, then there's no revenge, or there's no liability here. Ki kasbahu, because it belongs to you. All right, so in our case, where you sold the slave, but you retain the rights for 30 days, whose slave is it? Right? Rameir Omer Harishon Yeshno B'din Yom Yomayim. It's the first one, who is considered the owner, the original owner. B'nei Shutachta, because he's still working for you. Vasheni Eino B'din Yom Yomayim. He's not subject to that rule. B'nei Sheino Tachta, because even though you bought the slave, he hasn't kind of started working for you yet. So he's not really yours in that sense.
So when did he hit
So
him? When did he hit him? Before the money changed hands, or
after the money changed hands, but
but
before,
he hasn't
but
started working?
right,
Even though
right.
he
So
owns the slave, he purchased him. He doesn't yet fully own him because the slave hasn't worked for him yet.
right, exactly. Well, that's the dispute. Is it that way, or because the money has already changed hands, did the ownership change? Right, so that's the dispute here in this brisa. So kasavra, so we see that Reb Meir holds, who says the first one is the one that's the owner. Kinyan peros, kikinyan leguftame. That so the slaves, we're saying the parallel here is the slaves' work. The benefit of his work is peros, right? That's the same like a nichse milog, and one person owns the field, the wife owns the field, the husband owns the produce, right? So here too, one guy, the buyer owns the slave, but for the first 30 days under the terms of this deal, the seller owns the produce. So Rabbi Meir says it's the first guy who's considered the owner. So he seems to think that the guy who owns the produce is really considered the owner. Now Rabbi Huda Omer, Hasheni, Rabbi Yehuda says, he argues with Rameir. He says, no, it's the buyer, who Yeshua B'din Yom Yomayim. He's considered the owner, but B'nei Kasmo, because he's owns the property, right? He owns the slave. So sure, he's rented them out or whatever, but that doesn't matter. Owns the title. Harishon Eino B'din Yom Yomayim, and not the first one, Sheino Kasmo, because he only owns the produce, not the principal. So kasavar. So clearly, what Rabbi Yehuda holds is kinyan peres lav kinyan ufname, right? That owning the produce is not the same as owning the thing itself. And Rabbi Yossi says, Shneim b'din yom yomayim, both of them are considered owners. Zem neshu tachtov, zem neshu kaspo. There's two aspects of ownership here. One is the benefit of his work, and one is the title. And each of those is a form of ownership. So each of them has this rule of being the owner and subject to the yom yomayim. That if whichever one of them strikes him and kills him, if he lasts a day or two, then you're off the hook because it's your own money, your own ownership.
Who does he have to pay for the damage or the death of the slave?
No, it's not a question of payment. It's a liability for death, right? I guess it's the death penalty. Do you get death penalty for killing a non-Jew? I don't remember.
I don't.
What does liability mean here? Just a second, I think I might have referred to that in the notes. Yeah, it seems like you're liable for the death penalty if you kill someone who's a Eved Kanani. Okay, now Umasafkale Rabbi Yossi is unsure. Ikinyan Paris Kikina Guftame. Ilaf Kikina Guftame. He's unsure what determines the ownership with regard to this rule of Yoma Yomayim. He's unsure if it's the ownership of title or ownership of the produce. So since we're unsure, we'll apply the Yoma Yomayim exemptions because when it comes to should we put this guy to death for what he's done, we have to be, we have to err on the side of caution. Rabbi Lazar Omer, and Rabbi Lazar says a fourth view. Neither one of them is considered the owners. Zelafi Sheno Tastos, Zelafi Sheno Kaspo. Okay. Now the Amar Rava. And Rav says about Rabbi Lazar, my Talmud Rabbi Lazar, why does Rabbi Lazar say neither one of them that can be exempted from liability from the 1 or 2 day lingering rule? Amar Kra, because the Torah says, Lo yukam ki kaspahu. From the wording of we don't avenge the death of the slave, ki kaspahu, because the slave is the owner's property. Kaspo hamiyuchadlo, by saying Kaspo is his property, means like when you have property, it's something that's exclusive to you. The whole meaning of property is something that gives you rights and everyone else is denied rights. Okay, so this kind of arrangement where you have the title, but the payros belongs to somebody else, that's not true property. That's not full property, right? That's not full ownership. Since it's not full ownership, Rebbe Lezer says neither of them can have this exemption of the owner. Okay. Okay, so where does that leave us? What were we trying to accomplish with this price in the first place? Oh yeah, so a Maimar could be saying like Rabbi Lazar, right? Rabbi Lazar is saying that if you don't have full control, you don't have true ownership. If we apply that to the Nichsei Milug, or to the property being sold by the husband and the wife, it's like neither of them are considered fully the owners of the property, and that's why the sale would not be valid. Okay. Now, the next thing in the Mishnah. V'lo leish chazaka b'nichsei ishto. The husband cannot exercise a chazaka on the property of the wife. V'amar Rav, so Rav asks, Yeishes ish tzricha limchos. That a wife has to lodge a protest, right? If she wants to prevent a chazaka from taking place, then she has to protest. B'man. Now, what are we talking about here? Ilema bi'acher. If we're talking about a third party, right? There's a squatter that's not the husband that comes and tries to exercise a chazaka. V'amarav en machzikim b'nichsei eshes ish. Well, that can't be because if the property belongs to the woman, to the wife, then nobody else can exercise a chazaka on it. Elulav Babal. So who is it? It must be the owner. The owner. It must be the husband, who she's protesting against. So how do you explain our Mishnah? Like, if there's such a thing as a protest, that implies there is a chazaka if there's no protest. So how can the Mishnah say that there's no that a man can't have a chazaka uh, over the property of his wife, or the olam babal? That we're actually talking about the husband. What the husband is doing is he's going and digging ditches in the wife's field. Now, in the case of property that a woman brings into the marriage, the husband gets the benefit of the produce, but he doesn't have the benefit of being able to dig in it. I think he can't turn it into a salt mine. He can't dig things in it. It changes the nature of the field. So that kind of thing, the wife has to protest against, right? Just his using it, I understand that she doesn't have to protest because everybody understands that the fact that he is harvesting in the field and using the produce, that's because they're married, right? And he has the right to do that. It doesn't mean that he owns the field, but if he goes ahead and starts digging ditches in it, then that would indicate that he owns the field. And if she fails to protest, then he can have a chazaka. You can't have a chazaka that way.
How
Um,
does that, how does that affect a potential protest against the sale of the land? Shouldn't she also be able to protest that if she owns the land and it's next to Malug?
well, we've moved on from discussing the sale, right? Now we're talking about the Mishnah has we're discussing the Mishnah statement that that a husband cannot exercise a chazaka in his wife's property. Okay.
I think we would have established that earlier in discussing the sale. He doesn't have the right to sell. Why do we even have to discuss digging pits, digging? He can't establish a chazaka. It's not his.
Right, but what the mission is saying, or what our interpretation of the mission is saying here, is that if he starts digging pit and ditches in it, right? What's the reason that he doesn't have a chazaka in her field? Because even though he's harvesting the field for 20 years, right? Everybody understands they're married, so that's why. It's not because he owns the field; it's because his wife owns the field, and that's why he has the right to do that. So she doesn't have to lodge any protest, right, for her to maintain that claim, right? But what if he exceeds his rights? What if he digs ditches in it? Now, the marriage doesn't give him the right to do that, right? So if for 3 years he's digging ditches in it and she says nothing, then that could be a valid chazaka, right? He's doing something to which no one thinks he has any right to do unless he were the owner of the field, right? And by her not protesting, she is conceding that he's the owner of the field.
It's okay, but it just seems to, all right, I hear it, but it seems a bit of a stretch when we know that she's the owner. Okay, all right. That's
Yeah.
good. Okay.
Okay. So the Gemara asks us, Rav Nachman or Rabba Baravua, Ein Chazaka L'Nezakin. Wait a minute, we have another principle that in terms of doing damage to a field does not establish a chazaka. So Ema Ein Din Chazaka L'Nezakin. So Gemara says, well, let's reinterpret that. What Rav Nachman means is that there is no three-year chazaka. Uh, there's no 3-year rule, but there is a 1 second. You can establish a chazaka by damaging someone's field and he doesn't protest, but it's immediate. You don't have to wait 3 years. If I come into your field and start digging ditches, right, and damage your field, damage your property, if I come to your house and start demolishing it, right, you're not going to wait like 3 years to lodge your protest. You're going to it's different than squatting, right? Squatting is like, all right, I'm not going to bother kicking the guy out of the house, right? He's not doing anything to damage me. But if you start demolishing the house, I'm going to protest right away. So when it comes to squatting, there is a 3-year rule for chazaka. What Rav Nachman is saying is when it comes to damaging a property, the protest has to be lodged right away. And if you don't, then you're conceding a chazaka. Ibai Sema, or another way we could explain what Rav Nachman is saying is Lavi Marla. Didn't we say about that? Rav Mari Amar Bekutra. Rav Mari says we're talking about smoke, right? That like you're burning leaves, or I don't know, you're doing something that affects the property with smoke. And so what Rav Nachman is saying is that's not the kind of damage or occupancy or whatever that qualifies for a chazaka. You can protest anytime. There's no 3-year rule that says I've been doing this for 3 years, I can keep doing it. No, it's like uh, when we have a charcoal barbecue, and we used to light it with start it with newspaper, right? But the newspaper, especially once they switched to color print, it makes a lot of smoke, and my neighbors started complaining. So we switched back to using some other kind of fire starter. That was fine. But then, like years later, I forgot, and I started again with the newspaper, and it produced smoke, and I got a call from my neighbor. So I couldn't say, well, I've been doing this for years, right? It's like if you're making smoke, then if you're damaging her property in a sense, right? I'm inconveniencing her with the smoke. She can say anytime, hey, what's up with that? Maybe not the best parallel, but anyway.
Is this I don't understand. Is this a rebuttal to the
No, this is
to the
an
ditch
explanation
digging?
of what
To
Rav
the ditch
Nachman means,
digging?
right? We wanted
So
to say that Rav Nachman says Ein Chazaka L'Nizakin means that if you're damaging the property, then
by ditch digging.
that doesn't establish a chazaka, or that. So first we thought it meant that doesn't establish a chazaka. Then we explained no. What it means is that it establishes a chazaka right away. There's no need for 3 years. And now the other explanation is that nizakim, what Rav Nachman is referring to, is only specific types of nizakim which are particularly noxious, like smoke or rosvidam or vesakise, or that you've put an outhouse there, and so there's a very bad smell. That's Rav Nachman specifically referring to things that are particularly egregious, um, and not the general case. So in general, if you go and damage someone's field, then that does establish a chazaka if he doesn't protest.
So the ditch digging wouldn't apply. So the ditch digging, according to him, would be 3 years, right?
The ditch digging would be 3 years. Yes, right.
But the smoke is immediately.
Yes, that's right. Rav Yosef Omar. Okay, so now we're back to the question of the wife has to protest to prevent the chazaka, right? But the Mishnah says that the husband can't establish a chazaka. Our Mishnah says there's no chazaka for the husband and the wife's property. So how do we resolve that? Rav Yosef Amar, he has another explanation. You know what? When Rav says that the wife has to protest, we're actually talking about protesting against a third party, right? What Rav is talking about here is part of the 3 years was when the husband was still alive, and then another 3 years. So he started using it when the husband was still alive, and then the husband dies, and for 3 years he keeps using the land, this third party. And he's saying that I have a chazaka. I bought it from the husband. I don't have to prove it because I have a chazaka. So in this case, Rav says that there is such a thing as chazaka. In other words, the wife would have had to protest. Migo di zavinta minach, because he could say, he could say, you know what? I bought this from you 3 years ago after the husband died, right? After the husband died, it's no longer an issue of marriage. Um, it's clear who owns the property, and he used it for 3 years, and she didn't say anything. So he could advance that claim and say, and that would be a valid claim. He wouldn't have to show a receipt for the land. The chazaka would be valid. So since he has that possibility of a better claim, the fact that he says that he makes the claim that I bought it from the husband, that's why it works. When he says that I bought it from the husband who had bought it from you, then we do believe him. Okay. We said just a minute ago, Amar Rav, Ein Machzikin b'nichsei eshes. Rav said you can't have a chazaka in the a wife's property. V'daina gola amru, but the judges of the gola of the diaspora said machzikin, you can't have such a chazaka. Amar Rav, halacha k'daina gola. Rav said we rule like that you can't have a chazaka. Amalei Rav Chana Rav Asi Rav, but so Rav Chana and Rav Asi asked him, Hadar be Mar Mishmate, did you change your mind? Like, are you like now agreeing with them and taking back what you said? Amalei, he said, Mistabra Amri Kid Rav Yosef. He says, no, I'm not withdrawing my view, but I'm saying that, you know what, their view actually makes a lot of sense because uh their view makes sense in the case of Rav Yosef, which was
Achar mitat habal, right?
right. When the case that we just discussed, where the guy had occupied the property when the husband was still alive, and then he died, and he did it for another 3 years. Okay, we'll stop here for today and pick it up here tomorrow. Have a good day.
Good day.